The alien transport ship cut through the clouds, its engines roaring in the thin, icy air. Below, it stretched the endless frozen plains of Renos, a planet so cold that metal could snap like glass. A place where storms could strip flesh from bone. The alien crew inside the ship were tense, even though they wore thick, armored survival suits. Each suit had built-in heaters, oxygen supply, and layered insulation without them. No one could last more than a few minutes outside. Captain Ralvek stood near the viewing window, his 4 black eyes scanning the endless white. He was a veteran soldier of the Varnak Empire, a warrior who had fought on many worlds. But even he hated Vrenos. It was the kind of place that punished weakness without mercy. He turned to his crew and spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. Remember? No one removes their helmet outside. This planet kills without warning. The soldiers nodded. They had all heard the horror stories aliens frozen solid within seconds. Their bodies left as ice statues on the plains at the back of the group. Daniel Kane, the only human on the mission, tightened the straps on his light jacket. It wasn't thick. It didn't have heating coils. It was just a simple, weather-worn jacket that looked like it belonged in a cool autumn, not a deadly ice world. One alien soldier noticed and snorted in disbelief. "You will die before your first step, human," he sneered. Daniel looked up, with calm, blue eyes. "We'll see." The alien crew exchanged glances. They thought humans were soft, fragile creatures that needed constant protection. Many of them believed humans had only survived in the galaxy because of their machines, not because of any real physical strength. To them, sending Daniel here without proper gear was almost cruel, though some were secretly eager to see him fail. The ship landed with a heavy thud, snow blasting around it like white smoke. The hatch hissed open and a wave of freezing air rushed inside, sharp and biting. The alien soldiers stepped out first, their boots sinking into the snow. They moved stiffly, their breath visible through the heaters in their helmets. Then Daniel stepped forward. No helmet, no gloves, only that light jacket and a pair of sturdy boots. The cold slammed into him like a wall, but his face didn't change. His breath came out in white clouds, but his steps were steady, his eyes locked on the horizon. The wind howled across the plains, carrying with it shards of ice that stung like needles. Alien soldiers hunched against the blast, but Daniel kept walking upright as if it were just another winter day back home. Captain Ralvek watched closely. He expected to see shivering, signs of frostbite, weakness. Instead, he saw a man who seemed unaffected. It was impossible, yet it was happening in front of him. Human Ralvek called out over the comms. "What is your core temperature?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He stopped, looked back with a half smile, and said, "Warm enough." The aliens muttered among themselves. Warm enough. At this temperature, most species' blood would begin to freeze in minutes. Even the Varnak with their thick hides couldn't last long without heated suits. They began their march toward an old research outpost buried under snow and ice. It was only 3 kilometers away. But in this weather, that was a dangerous journey. Visibility dropped quickly as the wind picked up. The alien soldiers relied on their helmet sensors to navigate. But Daniel just squinted and kept moving, following the faint shape of the mountains ahead. After 20 minutes, one alien soldier stumbled and fell to his knees. His heater unit had malfunctioned, and his suit was losing warmth fast. The others gathered around, trying to repair it before the cold claimed him. Daniel didn't hesitate. He crouched, lifted the alien onto his back, and began walking toward the outpost. The alien was twice Daniel's weight, but the human moved without slowing. His boots crunched through deep snow, his breath steady, his body somehow resisting the brutal cold that should have been killing him. Inside his helmet, Captain Ralvek's eyes narrowed. This was not normal. This was not weakness. This was something else. By the time they reached the outpost, frost had covered the alien soldiers' suits. Even with their heaters, they were trembling. Daniel set down the injured soldier, his face red from the wind, but otherwise perfectly fine. Ralvek stepped closer, studying the human. "How?" he demanded. "How can you endure this without protection?" Daniel shrugged. "Earth gets cold too. You learn to deal with it." Ralvek knew that wasn't the whole answer. There was something deeper here, something about humans the galaxy had overlooked. And for the first time, the captain felt a strange mix of curiosity and fear. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the alien commander's mind, a new thought had taken root. If a human could survive this, what else could they survive? Captain Ralvek could not sleep that night. The image of Daniel Kane walking through the deadly cold without protection kept replaying in his mind. The human's steady pace, his calm expression, the way he carried. The injured soldier defied reason. Varnek's soldiers were trained to adapt, but they adapted with technology. They needed heaters, reinforced armor, oxygen filters. Without those, they would perish. Yet this human had walked across Vrinos like it was his backyard. The next morning, Ralvek called his officers to the command table. "We will test the human," he said simply. The others glanced at each other. "Captain, the cold was already a test." One officer began, but Ralvek cut him off. "No, that was just walking. I want to see his limits. If humans are truly this resistant, we need to know how far it goes." They prepared a mission. Daniel was told only that he would be scouting a route to a supply drop. The aliens gave him a locator beacon, a small pack of supplies, and nothing more. No heater suit, no gloves. Outside, the wind screamed. Snow fell in heavy sheets, erasing the horizon. The temperature was far below freezing, low enough to kill in minutes. Daniel stepped outside, tightened his jacket, and started walking. The snow crunched under his boots, the wind tugged at his hair. But his movements were calm. Ralvek and his officers watched through drone cameras. For the first kilometer, nothing happened. Daniel moved steadily, pushing against the wind. His breathing was slow and even. The aliens monitored his body temperature, expecting it to drop dangerously, but it stayed surprisingly stable. The storm grew worse. Ice crystals stung like knives. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Daniel paused for a moment, squinting ahead, then changed direction slightly. As if sensing the land beneath the snow, after another kilometer, the aliens saw something that made them lean forward in their chairs. Daniel was building something. With his bare hands, he began stacking blocks of snow, shaping them into a curved wall. It took less than 20 minutes before he had built a small, igloo-like shelter. He crawled inside, out of the wind, and sat down. "Why is he stopping?" one alien muttered. Ralvek shook his head. "He's not stopping. He's surviving." Inside the shelter, Daniel pulled out a small metal flask and took a sip of water. He looked relaxed, almost comfortable. The temperature inside the snow shelter was warmer than the raging blizzard outside. It was still freezing, but his body seemed completely fine with it. After a short rest, Daniel emerged, kicked snow over the entrance to hide it, and continued toward the supply drop. Hours later, the drone footage showed the beacon approaching the target. The drop was a metal crate half buried in ice. Daniel knelt, brushed away the snow, and lifted it effortlessly. The crate weighed over 100 kilograms. Yet he slung it over his shoulder and began walking back. On the return trip, the storm reached its peak. Even the drones had trouble keeping up, their lenses freezing over. Daniel moved more slowly now, but not because of weakness. He was conserving energy. He knew how to move with the wind, how to lean into it without wasting strength. Back at the base, alien soldiers waited near the airlock. When Daniel walked in, frost clung to his hair and jacket, but his skin was normal color, his breathing steady. He set the crate down with a soft thud and smiled. "Your supplies," he said simply. Ralvek stepped forward. "You did not use the beacon to call for pickup?" Daniel shook his head. "Didn't need to. Just followed the wind back." The room was silent. The Varnock soldiers stared at him as if he were a ghost. They had all seen men freeze to death. In minutes on Vrinos, they'd all felt the bone-deep cold that sapped strength and hope. But this human had walked through it, built a shelter, carried a load heavier than most could lift, and returned without injury. One young alien whispered to another, "If humans can survive this, what else can they survive?" Ralvek heard the whisper, and for once, he didn't scold. He was wondering the same thing. Later that night, in the captain's private log, he wrote, "The human is not like us. He treats the cold as an inconvenience, not a danger. His methods are simple, no advanced tools. No special tech, but effective. If one human can do this, imagine an army of them. I am beginning to think our empire has underestimated Earth's children, and that could be dangerous." Outside, the storms of Vrinos continued to rage. But inside the base, the aliens were left with an unsettling truth. This was only the first test, and Captain Ralvek was far from finished. After the frozen world of Vrinos, the alien soldiers believed they had seen enough. But Captain Ralvek was not satisfied. The humans' resistance to extreme cold was impressive. Yes, but perhaps it was only because of some strange adaptation. Too low temperatures. Maybe he would fail in the opposite extreme. That is why the next mission brought them to Skorth, a desert moon famous for its brutal heat. Even before the transport ship touched down, the temperature outside was over 60 degrees Celsius. Skorth's twin suns blazed down on endless dunes of silver-gold sand. Winds carried hot dust that could strip paint from metal. The air shimmered with heat waves, and the ground itself could burn skin in seconds. Inside the landing bay, the Varnock soldiers were preparing. They wore layered cooling armor, each suit equipped with refrigeration units and hydration packs. Special filters kept sand from clogging their vents. Even with all of this, most soldiers could only last a few. Hours before collapsing, Daniel Kane stood near the ramp, once again without the advanced gear. He wore light desert trousers, a loose shirt, and a scarf wrapped around his neck. His only visible protection was a simple pair of sunglasses. One alien soldier shook his head. First the cold, now the heat. This time, human, you will fail. Daniel just grinned. You said that last time. The mission was simple. Cross the southern dunes to a small outpost where heat-reactive minerals were stored. Retrieve a package and return. But the southern dunes were known for their danger-rolling hills of scorching sand, shifting underfoot, with temperatures hot enough to melt weak alloys. When the ramp opened, a wave of heat slammed into the group like a furnace door. The aliens staggered slightly, adjusting their cooling systems. Daniel stepped forward, breathing in the hot air as if it were nothing more than a summer afternoon. They began their march. The sand shifted with each step, swallowing their boots. The heat pressed down from above and radiated up from below, wrapping the world in a suffocating embrace. After the first kilometer, the alien soldiers were already taking short breaks, their cooling units struggling. Daniel, however, was moving ahead of them, his pace steady, his breathing calm. He drank from a canteen only once, taking small sips. By midday, the temperature had climbed higher. Even the sand seemed to glow. One of the younger alien soldiers stumbled, his cooling pack flashing red. Before anyone else could react, Daniel was at his side. He pulled the soldier's arm over his shoulder and began walking toward the nearest dune ridge. There, he dug a shallow trench in the sand and covered it with a thin emergency tarp from his pack. The trench was cooler underneath, Daniel knew. This from experience. He left the alien to rest in the shade while he scouted ahead alone. The aliens watching from the ship's drones saw something remarkable. Daniel was walking directly across the exposed dunes without shade, without stopping, and without any visible signs of overheating. His body temperature, while elevated, was nowhere near dangerous levels. When he reached the outpost, the small building's metal walls were almost too hot to touch. Yet Daniel entered, retrieved the mineral package, and began his return trip. Halfway back, a sudden sandstorm swept over the desert. The wind screamed, filling the air with blinding grit. The alien soldiers huddled together, relying on their suits to shield them. Through the drone feed, Ralvek saw Daniel wrap his scarf over his face and keep walking into the storm. His movements were careful, timed with the gusts, his head low to avoid the worst of the sand. Hours later, when the storm finally died, a figure emerged from the haze. Daniel, carrying both the mineral package and the young alien soldier he had rescued earlier. The soldier's suit had failed completely. But Daniel's bare hands had dragged him through the heat without pause. Back in the landing bay, the alien soldiers stared. Steam rose from their cooling suits, their faces pale and exhausted. Daniel set the soldier down gently, handed Ralvek the package, and said, "This place could use a bit more shade." Ralvek didn't answer right away. His mind was turning over everything he had seen. Cold had not stopped the human. Heat had not stopped him either. And unlike many soldiers, Daniel had not only survived, he had saved others while doing it. That night, in his private log, Ralvek wrote, "The human's body adapts with frightening speed. He uses no advanced tools, only instinct and knowledge. He moves as if extremes are merely obstacles, not threats. If humans can thrive in both ice and fire, then there may be no climate in the galaxy that can kill them. This is unsettling." But even as he wrote the words, Ralvek knew one thing. For certain, he still wasn't finished with his tests. The cold had failed to stop the human. The heat had failed to stop the human. Captain Ralvek was beginning to understand something the galaxy had overlooked. Humans were not only adaptable, they were dangerous because of it. But Ralvek was a commander, and commanders did not settle for half-truths. If Daniel Kane could resist extreme cold and burning heat, perhaps there was still an environment that could break him. So the next mission took them to Krylo 7, a swamp-covered planet wrapped in thick green clouds. From orbit, the world looked peaceful, but the truth was far from it. The rain on Krylo 7 was mildly acidic, not strong enough to melt metal instantly, but strong enough to burn skin, corrode armor, and kill any unprotected being within minutes as the transport ship descended. The sound of distant thunder rolled through the air. Lightning flashed across the thick clouds, and the rain was already falling in heavy sheets. It hissed and sizzled wherever it touched the ship's hull. In the landing bay, the Varnock soldiers prepared themselves. They wore reinforced acid-proof armor with sealed helmets and internal air filters. Every joint was coated with a chemical repellent to stop the rain from seeping through. Daniel Kane stood apart from them, pulling a simple hooded poncho over his clothes. It was made of a light, flexible material, but it was nowhere near as thick or protective as the alien suits. One alien engineer frowned. "That will not last long, human. The rain will eat through it." Daniel adjusted the hood and smiled. Faintly, "It only has to last until I get where I'm going." The mission? Travel from the landing zone to an abandoned supply cache deep in the swamp. The path was 3 kilometers through knee-deep mud, poisonous plants, and constant rainfall. When the hatch opened, the smell of the swamp hit them first thick, damp air mixed with a faint metallic temps from the acid. The rain fell in heavy drops, hissing wherever it landed, The aliens stepped out cautiously, their suits protecting them but slowing their movements. Daniel stepped out after them, the poncho's hood drawn low. The rain spattered against the fabric, running down in streams. He moved quickly, stepping around deep puddles and ducking under the thick, moss-covered trees after just 5 minutes. One alien soldier slipped in the mud and fell, his leg sinking into a hidden pool of acidic water. His armor smoked where the liquid touched it, alarms blaring inside his helmet. Daniel was beside him in seconds, hauling him out and rinsing the acid off with water from his flask before it could eat deeper into the suit. "Keep moving," Daniel said simply, before taking the lead. As they went deeper, the swamp grew darker. The trees leaned close together, their roots twisting above the water. Strange shapes moved in the distance, alien creatures that had adapted to the acidic rain, their skin tough and scarred. Every so often, Daniel would lift his head slightly, letting a few drops of rain touch his skin. The aliens noticed and stared in disbelief. While the acid burned holes in leaves and hissed on metal, Daniel's skin showed no visible damage. Ralvek, watching from the ship through the drone feeds, frowned. "Is the human immune to acid?" he asked the science officer. The officer shook his head. "No one is immune. But skin is thicker than ours, and perhaps the rain is not strong enough to break it quickly. Still, it should cause pain." He shows none. By the time they reached the supply cache, 2 alien soldiers were picked, struggling to keep pace. Their armor's outer layers were starting to corrode, and their breathing was heavy. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed only slightly damp, the poncho still holding up despite the constant assault. The cache was locked under a thick layer of rusted plating. The acid rain had eaten through parts of it, but not enough to open it easily. While the aliens scanned for a safe entry method, Daniel simply pulled a metal bar from his pack and forced the door open with his bare hands. Inside, he retrieved the supply containers and began the trek back. On the return trip, the rain grew heavier. Even Daniel's poncho began to wear thin in places. Acidic droplets hit his arm, leaving faint red marks, but he didn't slow down. He led the group at a steady pace, ensuring no one fell behind. When they finally reached the landing zone, the alien's armor was pitted and smoking. But Daniel's expression was calm. He pulled back his hood, revealing skin damp and reddened in spots, but far from the burns the aliens expected. One soldier shook his head. "You walk through poison rain like it's just water?" Daniel chuckled. "On Earth, we call it acid rain. It's nothing new." Ralvek stared at him for a long moment. This wasn't just endurance, it was familiarity. The human had faced environments like this before, maybe not as dangerous, but dangerous enough to prepare him. That night, the captain wrote in his private log, "The human continues to defy expectations." Cold did not break him. Heat did not break him. Now acid fails as well. He protects others, moves with purpose, and treats the deadliest worlds as inconveniences. I am beginning to think there is no natural force that can truly stop a determined human. But deep down, Ralvek wasn't just impressed anymore, he was worried. Captain Ralvek had to admit it. Teach mission so far had only deepened the mystery. Cold had not stopped Daniel. Heat had not stopped him. Acid rain had not stopped him. Every time the human came back alive, unbroken, and carrying someone else's load if needed. But there was one last natural force Ralvek wanted to test before he admitted defeat: the winds of Trell's spine. Trell's spine was a high-altitude range of jagged black mountains on the planet Dravox. The air was thin, the peaks sharp as knives, and the wind screamed through the narrow passes at speeds that could shatter bones. Entire alien expeditions had been swept away into the abyss below. The Varnock had strict orders, no travel during the peak wind season. Ralvek, however, had another plan. When Daniel stepped into the mission briefing, the captain gestured to the holographic map. "We will cross here," he said, pointing to the highest ridge. "The winds will test your limits." The alien soldiers in the room shifted uncomfortably. One finally spoke. "Captain, even with anchors and cable lines, we barely survived that route." Ralvek's voice was cold. "Exactly. I want to see if the human can." The transport landed at the base of the mountains. The air was already sharp and thin, each breath like inhaling ice. The peaks above were hidden by swirling clouds, and the deep roar of wind echoed through the valleys like the growl of some great beast. The alien soldiers stepped out in heavy climbing, gear-thick wind-proof armor, magnetic boots, oxygen masks, and anchor cables. Daniel Kane stepped out, wearing only a reinforced climbing jacket, gloves, and goggles. No oxygen mask. No magnetic boots. One soldier couldn't hide his disbelief. "You will be blown into the gorge before we reach the first ridge." Daniel adjusted his goggles, smiling faintly. "If I do, try not to miss me too much." The climb began. The path was narrow, the drop on either side disappearing into white clouds far below. The wind was strong even here, tugging at clothes and pulling at every loose strap. As they ascended, the force of the wind increased. It came in powerful gusts that slammed into them without warning. The alien soldiers leaned heavily on their anchored cables, gripping the rock for dear life. Daniel did not use an anchor. Instead, he moved with the wind, timing his steps between gusts, leaning his body into the blasts at just the right angle to keep balance. His boots gripped the rock. Naturally, each movement deliberate. Halfway up, a massive gust roared through the pass, tearing one alien soldier's anchor line loose. He screamed as the wind dragged him toward the edge. Without hesitation, Daniel lunged, grabbing the soldier's arm with one hand and the rock face with the other. Muscles straining, he pulled the soldier back against the wind's force until others secured him again. The aliens were breathing hard now, their oxygen tanks running low from the thin atmosphere. Daniel, though breathing faster, did not seem in danger. His body adjusted to the low air, its breath deep and controlled. When they reached the narrow spine of the ridge, the real test began. Here, the wind screamed so loudly it was hard to hear each other. Loose stones became projectiles, whistling past their heads. The aliens crouched low, moving slowly, but Daniel stood almost upright, using the wind like a wall to lean against. Ralvek, watching from the drone feed, could hardly believe it. The human wasn't fighting the wind, he was using it, shifting his body weight just enough to let the gusts push him into the safest spots, taking each step when the wind slowed. It was the movement of someone who had learned from storms before. As they approached the final stretch, another blast of wind struck, stronger than anything yet. The group staggered, anchors groaning against the force. Daniel dropped low, bracing himself, then moved forward in a quick burst, reaching the other side of the ridge first. One by one, the others followed, collapsing in exhaustion as they reached the relative safety of the leeward side. Daniel simply stood there, scanning the horizon with calm eyes, as if the wind had been no more than an annoying breeze. Back at the landing site, the alien soldiers removed their masks, gasping for air. Daniel pulled off his goggles, his hair wild from the wind, but his breathing steady. Ralvek stepped forward. "You've walked through freezing ice, burning deserts, poison rain, and now winds that kill. Tell me, human, what world made you this way?" Daniel looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Earth." He said it simply, like it explained everything. That night, Ralvek's log entry was shorter than usual. Wind could not break him. Nothing in nature seems to. If humans are this adaptable, then no planet is safe from them, not because they conquer it with weapons, but because they simply refuse to die. And though the captain didn't say it aloud, he now knew the truth. The galaxy's greatest danger was not human technology. It was the human will. Captain Ralvek had run out of ideas. Every test he had thrown at Daniel Kane, cold, heat, acid rain, deadly winds, had ended the same way. The human returned alive, calm, and often carrying someone else who couldn't finish the journey. Ralvek had seen soldiers from dozens of worlds break under far less, but not this human. Never this human. That night, inside the Varnock Research Vessel VREL, Ralvek called a meeting in the council chamber. Present were his senior officers, the science division, and a few medical experts from different worlds. On the table sat a holographic display, showing Daniel's medical readings from all 4 missions. Heart rate, body temperature, oxygen levels, well, remarkably stable, even in environments that should have pushed him to the brink. Dr. Sesrick, the lead xenobiologist, stood to speak. Her scaled fingers tapped the holographic controls. We've studied his biology in detail. What we have found is alarming. Ralvek leaned forward. Explain. Sesrick brought up a rotating image of a human body, marked with colored data. Lines first, his body adapts faster than any species we've seen. In cold, his muscles generate heat efficiently, and his blood thickens slightly to slow heat loss. In heat, his sweat glands activate in a controlled way to cool him without losing too much water. In thin air, his lungs increase oxygen intake, and his red blood cells multiply rapidly. These changes begin within minutes, not days. An officer frowned. That is impossible. Adaptation takes generations, not minutes. Sesrick's voice was calm. For most species, yes. But humans evolved on a planet of extremes. Ice ages, deserts, hurricanes, volcanoes, floods. Every generation faced a new disaster. Adaptation became not just a skill, but their nature. She switched the display to Earth's climate map. This is their homeworld. Multiple biomes each, deadly in its own way. Their ancestors were forced to survive in all of them. Ralvek stared at the map. They're not specialists. They are generalists. Exactly, Sesrick replied. Most species evolved for one environment. Take them out of it, and they die. But humans are different. Remove them from one danger, they simply adapt to another. Another officer leaned back, troubled. That would explain his resistance to the cold, heat, and wind. But what about the acid rain? No one walks through acid without pain. Sesrick brought up another scan. Human skin is thicker than ours, with multiple protective layers. It heals faster, too. Small burns seal over quickly. Perhaps most important, humans have an unusually high pain tolerance. They can keep moving even while injured. There was a long silence in the room. Ralvek finally spoke. So the galaxy fears our warships, our armies, our technology. But this human survived everything with nothing more than simple tools and his own body. Yes, Sesrick said quietly. If one human can do this, imagine thousands. Imagine an army that can fight in any climate without needing to adapt their equipment. Imagine colonists who can settle on worlds where other species die within. Ours. There would be no place they could not go. Ralvek felt a cold knot form in his chest, not from fear of Daniel, but from what such adaptability meant for the future. The Varnock Empire had always measured power in fleets and weapons. But humans possessed something far older and more dangerous: the refusal to die. When the meeting ended, Ralvek stayed behind. He sat in silence for a long while, staring out the window at the stars. Later, he found Daniel in the training hall, repairing a torn strap on his pack. "You knew, didn't you?" Ralvek asked. "Knew what?" Daniel replied without looking up. "That nothing I threw at you would break you." Daniel gave a small smile. "I didn't know. I just know how to keep moving." Ralvek stepped closer. How does your kind survive so much? You face things that should have killed you. Daniel shrugged. We don't think about dying. We think about living. Cold, heat, storms, poison, none of it matters if you keep going. On Earth, we didn't have a choice. Nature was always trying to kill us, so we learned to push back. There was no pride in his tone, no arrogance, just a simple statement of fact. And that, Ralvek realized, was what made it so unsettling. The alien captain left the hall that night with a thought he could not shake. Humans are not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most intelligent. But they may be the hardest too. Kill, and in war. That is all that matters. The tests were over. But in Ralvek's mind, the real danger was just beginning. The next morning, the crew of the Virel gathered in the central hall. The missions were over. The storms, the heat, the acid rain, the deadly winds, Daniel Kane had faced them all, and returned alive. But this was no celebration. The alien soldiers stood in small groups, speaking in low voices. The way they looked at the human was different now. No more smirks. No more mocking comments. Instead, there was a strange mix in their eyes: respect, caution, and something that looked like fear. Captain Ralvek entered, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He walked straight to the center and faced Daniel. For a moment, he just looked at him, as if measuring the weight of the man before him. "You have done what no one else has done," Ralvek said. His voice was deep and slow. "For worlds, for environments, all meant to kill you. But you walked through them like a soldier walks down a corridor." Daniel shrugged lightly. "I just did what needed doing." Ralvek tilted his head. "Do you understand what you've shown us?" "Ah." Daniel met his eyes. "I think I do." The alien captain turned to the others. "You all saw it. You all know. This human was not chosen for his technology, his weapons, or his size. He was chosen because he is human. And humans, as we have learned, are not bound by nature the way we are. The cold could not freeze him. The heat could not burn him. The storms could not throw him down. Even poison rain only slowed him. Tell me, what army could stop a species like that? No one answered. Ralvek looked back at Daniel. The galaxy believes strength comes from fleets and guns. But I have learned a new truth. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one that simply refuses to fall. Daniel's face stayed calm, but his eyes were sharp. That's not a weapon, Captain. That's survival. The room was silent again. The aliens felt the weight of his words. Survival was not about winning quickly. It was about lasting longer than the danger. And if humans could survive longer than any threat, then no enemy could truly beat them. As the meeting broke up, several soldiers approached Daniel not to challenge him, but to speak quietly, almost respectfully. Some asked about his homeworld. Others asked about the storms and deserts of Earth. He answered simply, telling stories of blizzards that buried cities, heat waves that lasted weeks, and oceans that swallowed whole coasts. That night, Ralvek visited Daniel in the crew quarters. The human was sitting on his bunk, cleaning the small, simple tools he carried. "I have one last question," Ralvek said. Daniel looked up. "Go ahead." Ralvek stepped closer. "If your kind can survive anywhere, does that mean you can live on any world in the galaxy?" Daniel's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something colder in his expression. "We don't just live there, Captain. We make it home." Ralvek studied him for a long moment. The human's words were simple, but the meaning was clear. Once humans arrived somewhere, they stayed. No storm, no heat, no poison, no danger could drive them away. When Ralvek left the room, he wrote his final log entry. The Varnic Empire has measured species by technology and firepower. We were wrong. Humans are not the strongest in the ways we understand, but they are the most enduring. Their weapon is not their ships or their guns, but their ability to belong anywhere. Today, they are allies. Tomorrow, if they ever choose to be enemies, there will be nowhere in the galaxy to hide. The next day, the Virel departed for neutral space. Daniel stood near the observation deck, watching the stars slide past. He knew the aliens would speak of him after this. He knew they would change how they saw his people. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Because humans had a saying back on Earth. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, Daniel smiled faintly to himself. Out here, in the endless dark of the galaxy, that truth had never been more valuable.